hitting the road to face a tough game. A lot of people think they're going to struggle with number 20 Arkansas, while the Tide are a perfect 15-0 against the Hogs under Nick Saban. Elsewhere, number 9 Oklahoma State taking on 16th ranked Baylor. These teams split their two meetings last season, with the Bears winning the Big 12 title game in that matchup. And then you got Kentucky and Ole Miss this weekend, both off to 4-0 starts. They will meet as ranked opponents for just the second time in series history. And then game day will be in town for a top 10 showdown in the ACC. NC State and Clemson. Tigers have won 10 straight, which is the longest active win streak in the nation. And currently, they have the 4th highest chance to make the college football playoff, which is a good place to be when you consider that 4 teams get in. However, a loss on Saturday would crush them and would knock those chances down significantly, as you see. And they escaped last weekend by the hair of their chinny chin in a tough game with Wake Forest. And so let's bring in Heather Dinich and Paul Finebaum here. Heather and Paul. Heather's at the Big Ten. We'll explain why that is in just a moment. But Paul, let's start with that. There were some questions with Clemson. They got a tough one this weekend. To you, do they have more answers or more? Do you have more questions or answers about Clemson right now?
Well, everything is just backed up and screwed up because the defense is not as good and the offense with DJ is much better. And you have to start wondering what the difference has been with Brent Venables having left. He was the stalwart of that defense at Clemson. Now he's at Oklahoma, struggling there after a loss over the weekend. So I think that's really the issue, Greeny. And as far as what happens after this, they would be in big trouble if they can't get a win at home.
What do you think, Heather?
Well, if they don't win, they're going to be hanging from a cliff as far as the playoff is concerned, and so is the entire ACC. But I agree with Paul. When you watch that game against Wake Forest, it was a gritty win. I thought it was very good for Clemson and put them in the driver's seat in the Atlantic Division. But here's the thing. I watched that game, and I saw Wake Forest receivers do that against Clemson secondary, and my question was, what happens to Clemson secondary if they play Ohio State? Because that's where I was watching the Buckeyes beat up on Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, so they got a long way to go before they get that game, but we'll see if they do get it. In the meantime, let's go to the SEC. Paul, your neck of the woods. And I've heard a bunch of people say they think Alabama's going to have a very tough time with Arkansas. What do you expect?
I expect a very tough time, and some of the people in Arkansas are saying that had Arkansas beaten A&M, remember they lost on that field goal, they would have had more momentum. I'm not really sure I understand all that, but I do know this. Alabama is in a very difficult stretch right now. They have this game. They have A&M next week at home. Then they go to Tennessee. It's really hard to believe they're going to survive this stretch, especially the road games, based on what we have seen of them in recent years, Greeny. They struggled on the road.
A&M next week at home. Then they go to Tennessee. It's really hard to believe they're going to survive this stretch, especially the road games, based on what we have seen of them in recent years, Greeny. They struggled on the road against Texas. Last year, they had a hard time in 3 of their 4 road games. They lost one and barely won 2 of the other ones, one in overtime and the other one on a last-second stop. So I'm fairly concerned about Alabama over these next few weeks, including Saturday at Fayetteville.
All right, so that should be a very interesting game. In the meantime, speaking of interesting, the world, the entire sport of college football is sort of shifting beneath our feet as we speak. And Heather, you're there in Chicago right now, in the epicenter of all of that. Explain what's going on at the CFP expansion meetings and why it is so important.
It's so important because these 10 FBS commissioners and Notre Dame Athletic Director Jack Swarbrick are trying to figure out if they could expand the playoff to 12 teams before 2026. It's going to happen in 2026. Can they do it as soon as 2024? And CFP Executive Director Bill Hancock came out after about 6.5 hours of meetings yesterday and told a small group of reporters here, we're not going to make this decision right here, right now. So they are targeting October 20th, a meeting in Dallas where they expect and hope to have a lot more information. Remember, on September 2nd, the 11 presidents and chancellors who control the playoff said this is going to 12. We're voting unanimously. You, the commissioners, figure out how to do it sooner. They haven't quite been able to do that yet. But, Greeny, one thing that's important that they're considering here and talking about, if not now, maybe later, is changing the whole college football calendar. They have discussed starting the season at week 0, which would move the conference championship games to Thanksgiving weekend. And Bill Hancock said yesterday that seems to be something long-term down the road. They're trying to figure out if it's feasible.
Paul, do you like it?
I like what they're doing, but Greeny, I don't know what's so difficult. I mean, there's about $500 million at stake here. The whole sport hangs in the balance. Why can't these men and women sit around and say, okay, let's figure this out. All in favor, yay. I've never seen a group of people that have to have more meetings. Okay, another meeting in October. Let's have another meeting the next month. I mean, just get it done because the sport desperately needs it.
Yes, far too often the meetings are just called to decide when the next meeting is going to be. We'll see what comes out of Chicago today. Heather will have all the information. In the meantime, we got the great ones coming your way on Saturday, including that game we talked about. We got Clemson and NC State, Saturday night primetime. Chris and Kirk are there, 7:30 Eastern on ABC. Everything is at stake in that one, and our buddy McAfee will be alongside on ESPN2 at the same time. All right, coming up, Aaron Rodgers has been good, maybe not great this season. We'll tell you why the Packers might be just fine with that when we continue next. Get up on ESPN. I'll tell you right now, would still kick your butt up and down Michigan Avenue. So laugh at him at your own risk as we continue. Let's play Fact or Fiction. Canty. Lamar Jackson is going to shatter the single-season touchdown record. Is that fact or fiction?
That's fact, G. Right now he's on pace for 56. Passing.
As we continue, let's play Fact or Fiction. Canty. Lamar Jackson is going to shatter the single-season touchdown record. Is that fact or fiction?
That's fact, G. Right now he's on pace for 56 passing touchdowns. That would eclipse Peyton Manning's 55. But here's the deal, G.
That's what I'm going to say. Sure.
Yeah, why do they stay? Nick, the Eagles are the best team in the NFC. Is that fact or fiction?
It's absolutely fact. They've been outstanding. The only question on their roster was their quarterback, and he may be the best thing on there right now. We wanted to know if he could pass the ball from the pocket, if he could attack zones. He's done that better than we could have ever hoped. If we continue to play like this and get even more help because everyone on his team is going to keep getting better, I think this team may be the best team in all of football.
Well, Nick loves it because he picked the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl before the season started.
Boy.
Vegas is starting to catch up. Right now, they have the Eagles and the Bucs tied with the shortest odds in the NFC to go on and win the championship, still behind the Bills and Chiefs. Now, I want to frame this conversation differently than I had originally planned because Chris Canty, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You just poured a little cold water on the Tua thing.
Yeah.
Are you pouring any cold water on the Jalen Hurts thing?
Hell no.
No. Okay.
I'm not putting any cold water on the Jalen Hurts thing.
No similarities there.
I'm completely bought into Jalen Hurts, and here's the difference between Jalen Hurts and Tua to me: the leadership intangibles. There's no question about who the leader of that Philadelphia Eagles team is, and all you hear from that locker room is them glowing about Jalen Hurts and his ability to lead and how he's taken it upon himself to improve this offseason, spending time on the West Coast with Tom House, working on his mechanics, and now seeing the return on investment. Look at that touch throw to Devontae Smith right there. That's on 4th and 2 right there. That's a big-time throw right before the halftime. There are a lot of things that we're seeing Jalen Hurts make improvements on in his overall game, and to me, that's the most impressive part about it. When a player already has a way where he can be successful by using him as a focal point in the run game, but then the evolution of him as a passer.
I'm not going to lie to you, Chris. You've only been married a very short time.
Yeah.
When you get this face, you got a problem. I'm telling you that right now. Kmart, what's your issue here?
You know what? My issue is I agree with everything Chris said about Jalen Hurts. See, now the clapping is backwards. Now you know I'm upset.
I don't know why you're doing the Nola clap on. We're in New Orleans right now.
Because if you're going to praise Tua, if you're going to praise Jalen, you need to praise Tua because you said I need to see Tua go up against the elite. And it's like, okay, he already beat the Bills and the Ravens. The Eagles have beaten the Lions, the Commanders, and Vikings. You know what I'm saying? Just make it make sense. Just make it make sense for me.
Well, I've seen one quarterback take his team to the playoffs. I haven't seen Tua do it.
Okay,
so there's that part of it too.
No, I'm with you.
I've seen one quarterback play a full season. I haven't seen the other one do that yet. So there's that too.
Make it like I get it.
So I'm trying to help you make it make sense.
I'm with you on Jalen. My issue is why are you hating on Tua so much?
I'm not hating on Tua. The jury's still out on Tua. I need to see a larger sample size with Tua. I've seen Jalen Hurts take a team to the playoffs, and I've seen him actually improve his game. So that's the difference. I'm not saying that Tua is not a good player. Tua has the highest QBR of anybody in football through the first 3 weeks. I want to see if he can do it for 17 weeks.
But we also need to see if Jalen can do this for, like, all these arguments.
I see Jalen take the team to the playoffs.
Are applicable.
Let me get Neek in here. Neek, what?
I'm enjoying this.
Me too.
I'm pro Tua. I'm pro Hurts.
Yes.
They're both doing. You can't take a team to the playoffs if the playoffs haven't started yet. So as long as Tua keeps meeting these checkpoints, then I'm gonna keep being pro Tua. The sky's the limit for him. And the same is true of Jalen Hurts. These guys are playing really well. There are other quarterbacks in this league that deserve our criticism. These two are not the ones.
Right.
The biggest thing I will say that I agree with Canty on is that one of the question marks about Tua coming out of college was his ability to stay healthy, perhaps because his frame is smaller. I mean, Jalen Hurts can squat 600 pounds. He's an enormous guy. Tua obviously isn't built that way. That does feel to me, Kmart, like the one very legitimate point he makes. He already gets banged up the other day. It's a terrible looking hit. We all think it's a hit, whatever it is. Of all the things that he said, that is the one that feels, to me, the most legitimate question mark about Tua right this minute.
I'll give you that, the health concerns. I'll give you that. The others, I need to see him against elite defenses and other teams. I just feel like that's just nitpicking a little bit.
Let me ask one quick question before I run on to other matters here. So Chris Canty may be the single largest person I've ever encountered in my entire life. Are you more afraid of her than you are of him?
Absolutely.
Me too.
I mean, I know better. I've been married to a black woman for 12 years. When she get to clapping on your ass, you better simmer down. I know that.
I started rolling in this direction.
Come on over here, Greeny.
Come on over here.
Come on over here, Greeny.
We have much more on the NFL as we roll on in just a moment. Right now, we're going to college football on a jam-packed slate this Saturday, which will